Bam.
This is Rick Ellis, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Wow, this is fun. We're in your home. Thank you for hosting me, by the way, first off. And we're down in San Diego, which is always a pleasure to come and visit. It's not far from home, but it's far enough that I don't get down here often enough. So thanks for hosting me. Everybody go check out rickellis.com to get everything about Rick and what he does. He is a professor of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The title professor, how do you feel about that?
You know, the first time I noticed, I was a fresh black belt and people started calling me professor. And after years of training, it took a little adjustment.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, really? Am I a professor? I mean, I guess I am.
Yeah. But it's a traditional way to do it, not just in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but in boxing. I'm making a movie about an old fight. This is an old boxing fight from the 1800s, 1880s. This is like the time, like before the time of even Butch Cassidy and Sundance, right? And they called these guys who would go down to the Olympic Club in San Francisco. They called them Professor whatever, because they were the master of boxing. And this is like before prize fighting was even really a career. And so like in the very, very beginnings, but it goes back that far, that title.
Well, in Brazil, in Portuguese rather, there's no word for teacher. Professor means teacher. And so I think that, you know, here it's a little more elevated.
Right. When you talk about that elevation and the transition to like, okay, now I really am a professor. I mean, you're a black belt, so you're a professor. You're teaching at brown belt, you know, and getting people coached up. But when did you really feel comfortable, like with your skills to actually like help someone like me who's just getting started? Like when does that happen earlier? Is that later? Like when do you develop, I'll call it mastery?
You know, it's a funny thing. I know a lot of black belts who have zero desire to teach. And everybody thinks, oh, you get your black belt, it's a natural thing to just teach. And some people are like, no, I want nothing to do with that. They're either nervous to be in front of people or whatever. Me, on the other hand, I have had opportunities to teach going all the way back to when I was a blue belt. I was one of Roy Dean's first students. Those unfamiliar, he's a very famous guy in Jiu-Jitsu. And when he opened his first school, I was there on day one. And so when you're part of a new school, at one point, the white belts were the senior students, and then the blue belts were the senior students, and then the purple belts. And that's kind of how it went. So I got some opportunities to be a substitute teacher as a blue belt. Then as a purple belt, I was training under a different instructor who hurt his back. He had to have surgery, and he asked me to run his program for about 6 months. And so I, you know, got that opportunity, which was great for me. You know, as a purple belt, you're considered like an early advanced student, and teaching is a really great way to begin really putting it together. And then a few years later, I opened my own school as a fresh brown belt and earned my black belt through that journey. So yeah, I've been teaching a long time. I've taught thousands and thousands of jiu-jitsu classes.
When you get someone like me in there, and this is one of the reasons why I found you. Everybody should go check it. Look, the link is down below, right down here. But that's Rick's YouTube channel. So whether or not you're a dude like me or just someone trying to understand mindset and whatever, it's a great channel. And this is how I found Rick. So I get Hodger Gracie's book, and I started reading it, and I'm like, man, I've got to do something. Like, you know, my body is aging. I've already used a lot of miles up, and so I'm very I don't know, concerned. Yeah, I'm concerned about like the longevity of my body. Like, will my shoulder need to be rebuilt? Probably at some point. Both my hips have to get replaced. But I'm not doing anything to forestall that. And obviously, if I weigh less, then I'm going to be easier on what's left of my body. So I was reading Hodger's book, and I'm like, damn it, I'm going to go check it out. And it's a dojo 5 minutes from my house, and so this is a great thing. I don't care about affiliation or anything. It's convenient. So can I go do it? And this is the big thing for me. But the thing that I didn't know was there's no one there who's old like me and understands my body. There's guys who are younger. Because when I was 35, I was still young and I was still rough on my body. But I need dudes who, I'm 55, I'm not the oldest guy in the world, but my neck is old. You got it bad. And I've learned that it's okay for me to say, I'm not going to do that move. I'm not going to do this particular warm up because it's more important for me to warm my back up or get my hips looser, that kind of thing. And so they've been great about that. But just understanding how to communicate to me, you've done a great job with that, helping me understand, like, how do I set my limits? How do I do the thing without ruining the thing?
Yeah. Well, jiu-jitsu is an interesting art in that it's the fastest growing martial art in the world. And we're seeing number one is we're seeing athletes that started 20 years ago now starting to confront the fact that they're older,
right,
and their bodies aren't as resilient and as capable as they used to be. And then also we're seeing guys like you who are just discovering jiu-jitsu for the first time.
yeah,
Maybe, exposed through Joe Rogan or Jocko or any of the other influencers who are really into jiu-jitsu. And it's an amazing life-changing art, but it's a little hard on your body, especially when you're new at it, because with skill comes the ability to be efficient with your body, the ability to keep yourself safe sort of intuitively. You have more discipline about where you're keeping your arms and your weight distribution, and you understand your body better so that you're not doing stupid things with your body. When you're a white belt, you're just flailing around.
Oh my gosh.
So, my heart always goes out to the older athletes that are just starting their journey at a more advanced age, because you have to go through all the phases of that before you have some skill and you can play in a little more conservative way and keep yourself safe.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I'm a grown person and I have control over my ego, it hits my ego. Like, hey, hang on a second, I've done some martial arts, but that's not why I'm there, right? I'm there because I don't even care about belts. I just want to get out, get active. Also, I want to make sure I brush my teeth when I get up. I want to take a shower before I go hug some. And it's just like, and these are things that kind of bolster me from like the depression that always claws at me, because part of my PTSD is depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation. And so by just doing the make your bed things, just getting up, man, it's already paying dividends. But I still, in the back of my head, I'm like, if I land on my right shoulder one more time the wrong way, I may have to, because right now, even this, like my range of motion is it's fine, but it's painful. Like my range of motion for no pain is right there.
Yeah.
Anything bigger than that, and then I get in the zone. And so it's not so much like tapping. It's just how many times can I fall down? How many times can I do this before something? And then I get out of that, and then now am I going to get more? So the concerns are bigger. When I was young, like how fast can we get to rolling? But now it's a strategic thing. It's not a tactical.
And at a lot of schools, the instructor is a guy who's in his 30s.
Yeah.
Their body is perfect. They don't have any aches and pains.
Yeah.
And they don't really understand.
Yeah.
The plight that we experience.
Yeah.
And even things like an ultra dynamic warm up where you're doing, diving forward rolls and, all this stuff. You're a little older. You got to really warm up into those kinds of dynamic movements. You can't just go hard right out of the gate. And a lot of times at the school, like, okay, let's go. And everyone's running and jumping and doing all this stuff. So finding a good environment where you are, number one, they respect the fact that you can't work as hard.
Right.
You can't spar every single round. You may not be able to do every aspect of the warm up. And you need to be in an environment where they're okay with that. And then you need to, because a lot of people are like, no, the instructor's telling me to do this. Well, I have to do that. No. You're the customer.
Right.
It's okay for you to set a boundary and say, listen, I've got a jacked up shoulder. I can't do certain things. There's some risk in me hitting the mat.
Yeah.
But that's, what you're experiencing is actually really common right now, because a lot of guys are discovering jiu-jitsu in their 40s, 50s, and beyond.
And I want to be fair to my place. It's great they listen to me, but I don't know that we communicate. And this is where I'm a communicator, and so I focus on how do I explain to you. Like I said, I'm going to go talk to Rick Ellis. He does this old man type jiu-jitsu, and what I think I hear them here is, oh yeah, I love old man tricks and everything. And I'm like, no. I'm trying to withstand.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, and so because they are young, right? Now there's the older guy, he gets it and everything else, but I've got a rebuilt ankle. I don't want a second one. I'm going to have parts replaced at some point.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to maintain what I have. And they've been great about allowing me that journey, but also you're right. I'm the customer. And I hadn't thought about that. I'm the customer. And so here's what I'm going to do. Like, I don't do anything where I put my hips above my neck.
Right.
I understand that provides flexibility and everything, but that to me is right. Maybe one day I'll work up to it, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
And like shoulder rolls, I'm not as flexible as everybody else.
Yeah.
And like I'll say, well, what hurts? And I'm like, oh, everything behind me,
Yeah.
all of my backs,
Yeah.
they all hurt, right? And so they're not going to stop hurting. It's just me managing the hurt that's there and trying to be able to work out as frequently as I'm able, because some of this is conditioning that I've got to get through.
Yeah. There's always an adaptation. Every sport has a physical adaptation necessary to do that sport, and you will not get that adaptation without doing that sport. So you want to learn to play tennis, you decide, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. Well, being stronger is better than being weaker, but that's not going to help you in tennis. What's going to help you is being on the court, learning to swing a racket. And jiu-jitsu is the same way. You're not going to get the adaptation and then later the optimization of your body and your movement without doing that thing. But it's a tricky calculus. Not getting injured on that journey,
the other day we were doing a standing sweep and I'm like, do not sweep my leg. Just I'll go on the ground, like and part of it's my fear of my ankle because it's there and I'm putting all my weight on one ankle and doing a fake kick. But part of it is like, hey, this thing's been rebuilt. I've not done these dynamic moves on it. I never thought I would, and so again, they're great about it, right? But there's a whole conversation and I'm managing a lot of things at once, my heart rate, but also I don't want to say my fear, but my apprehension, and some of this I have to try to see if it works. The other day we were rolling and my hips just don't move enough and there's no changing that, like they mechanically stop. And so I hit my mechanical stop and I didn't realize it. And it kind of flipped me off of the guy. And he's like, what happened? I'm like, oh no, my hips, they don't go that far. So, it was like a distance tap and I'm like, oh, I'm out of here, and was it scary a little bit? Yes, because you reach the mechanical stop of a hip, but also like, do I need to be in that? And I don't know. And I'm learning this is part of that experience. I'm managing a lot of things at once.
Learning your own body, specifically for the application of jiu-jitsu, that's something that takes some time. We all think, oh, I know my body. I know, I got a sore shoulder. I know the range of motion, but within the context of jiu-jitsu, that's a little different. And you need to go through that journey until you make peace with it. And you're like, okay, my body intuitively understands what it can do, what it can't do. And then you stop having to think about the things that are a problem. You just know that you're keeping yourself safe. And I wish there was some accelerator that could give people some baseline of skill so you didn't have to go through that journey, because you're the most risky to yourself and to others when you don't have skill. So getting over that hump is the first order of business, but it takes a while.
Another thing I've realized that I have to manage. Well, one is like my fight ego, which is different than my regular Pete ego. I don't want to lose, but I have to accept that losing is part of learning, and I've got to be a good partner. But also, I am easily the heaviest person that I ever roll with there by 40 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds sometimes, right? And they do a good job of matching us up pretty good. But also, I try not to default to big, powerful, strong arm guy. And like today, I learned the most obvious thing that I've learned 100 times, but just can't keep it is, 2-on-1 is good. So never occurred to me when I was rolling 2 feet on one leg is the same rule. And so these like little moments of brilliance flash into my head. I know it's all part of the journey. And some of it's because I'm a white belt, but some of it is because I don't know. I've never mastered some of these disciplines, even though I know a decent amount for a layperson.
Well, you've touched on a few things. One is the ego, which is always an issue. We have to suppress our ego at every phase of the journey. You think by the time you get to black belt, you must not have an ego anymore. Of course you do, because now you're expected to be the man. And, of course. So the ego is something that we battle continuously. What you want is a neutral ego, rather than an inflated ego or a deflated ego. You don't want the other direction where you're leaving the training academy feeling terrible about yourself because you didn't get the tap or you got tapped. And so the ego can really mess you up. And as older athletes, we remember what it was like back in the day. How, I could do gymnastics, I could do backflips and handsprings, and, I could walk on my hands. I could do all that stuff. And I still can to some extent when I'm fresh and my body's feeling good. But we think in our minds, I could do that. And then you go way too hard and you get hurt, or you don't tap in time. The ego, sometimes you don't want to accept the tap. And so you're fighting this thing at the end of the range of your arm, you're about to get tapped and you're fighting it. But the mistake was made long ago, right? You didn't adjust defensively like 3 steps earlier. And so this is just the end stage of a series of things that you didn't adjust for. So suppressing that ego and saying, okay, you got me. You don't have to go to the end of the range to tap. You got me. Let's see what went wrong here. And then keeping the ego suppressed so that you're willing to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how can I get better to do this? And not sort of, let your inflated ego say, no, whatever.
Yeah, boy, it's well, you're speaking right to me right there. And again, some of this is the early guy journey, but learning to get into shape. Like I'm still in the conditioning phase, but just I didn't have a sense because I don't hardly push myself like this anymore. I can go out and swim, but swimming's almost like walking for me, right? And so I don't get in my VO2 max because I just know where to sort of be. I don't know how to do that in this discipline, and so I find myself, I'm like, oh, and I'll do what I'm calling a heart rate tap, and I'm like, and I'm not going to have a heart attack, but I have got to slow my heart rate down because I'm done, and so I've just completely fatigued out, and I don't have the ability to rest. And all these things happen. It's been a real learning process just thinking about like this particular session, I'm not going to give max effort. And that really sits uncomfortably with me.
Yeah, well, grappling is very anaerobic. You're at the upper range typically of your heart rate.
Right.
With skill comes the ability to keep that heart rate lower because you're more efficient.
Yeah.
You're just not efficient with your body when you're a white belt. Everything feels like a threat when you're a white belt. You're engaging in all this muscular tension in really unproductive ways a lot of times. Whereas you watch the advanced guy and they're super relaxed, except for the one thing that they're fighting. Everything else is relaxed. And so kind of managing that becomes something that with skill you develop the ability to do. There's that, of course, that physical adaptation of being in shape enough that you can sustain higher rates of output. But then also you might look into breathing techniques that let you recover in between rounds. Because if you don't recover well, let's say you hit your max heart rate in this roll, you've got 60 seconds to get that heart rate down. And that is a trained skill. It takes some level of fitness to have a heart that is able to drop its heart rate with efficiently. And, so that's those things all need to be in place. And you're early in this journey and you're experiencing the fact that, man, I'm redlining myself. I'm not recovering in between rounds. I'm pushing too hard. I'm this. And you're like, what's the solution to that? Well, the solution is you have to just keep training. And it's the little epiphanies, the little improvements, and eventually you're like, okay, I'm doing this, pretty efficiently now.
Yeah, you're explaining to me 100%. It's funny, and I don't want this necessarily to be all about me, but I think I'm a good proxy for someone who's like, should I do? So first off, you should do this. It's really incredible, and whatever this is, this can be swimming, it can be pickleball, whatever it is, but go use your body where you can, because this is what keeps us younger, or at least able to maintain our quality of life. The thought of breathing, and again, I've learned this from you in your videos. I'm trying that box breathing. I'm trying to empty my lungs, not just huff and puff, but really focus on that. And I'm the only one doing this, by the way, because I'm the only one who's like, woo, I'm trying to catch up. But there is a limit, and there are times when I'm like, I am just going to let the next person go. I never would have skipped around before, but I'm like, I'm already worn out. I'm going to lay down, and 20 seconds later, I'm going to be out of gas again. And so learning to accept that while still pushing myself is, again, it's attacking my fight ego. There's another thing too I wanted to bring up, because I'm a combat guy. I see conflict in a different way, and I'm starting to realize that. So this is a part of me that I hadn't really explored before. And so when like fear and fight, flight, freeze comes into play, I want action. I want action. How do I move around this thing? And that is not proving to be very beneficial with what I'm doing now.
Right. Sometimes the correct thing to do is to not do anything. Because the right technique at the wrong time is the wrong technique.
Right.
And what happens is somebody passes your guard, they're starting to flatten you out, and you're bucking, you're doing all this stuff to get out. But again, the time to make those movements would have been a little bit earlier. You're a
Right.
little late on that, but recognizing when this person really has you locked down and it's inefficient to try to get out. There are guys who I can't escape. If they lock me down in side control or mount or something, it's not magic.
Yeah.
Against real skill. It can be very difficult. And so what you have to do is then say, okay, I'm just going to keep myself safe here. I'm going to become untappable from these worst case scenarios. And then you become very, very comfortable being flattened out in side control. Fine, I don't care. They're not going to tap me. Mount, great. Back, whatever. I don't care because my defense is really good. And then what happens is your opponents have to transition to something else because whatever they're doing isn't working. And it's in that moment that now there's some separation so that you can begin that escape sequence or that reversal or a sweep or whatever it is that you're doing. And so again, you're early in the journey. So you're having to discover all these things for yourself,
Right.
which can be frustrating and it can, take a while.
I find it interesting just to kind of realize, and I do sort of, don't picture me like meditating, but I meditate on what I did and how I approached it, what my goal was going in. And right now, really, like, it's just conditioning right now. Like, can I get my cardiovascular fitness up enough so that I can withstand the warm up without being completely gassed, And that also has allowed me to go, I don't have to do all 20 jumping jacks.
Yeah.
I can just do them at my pace. I can count with everybody else if I can.
Yeah.
And the warm up has become less of a chore. So at some point, I usually have a pretty big motor. So once I get into shape, I'll be all right for that.
Yeah.
But still, like the up and down of the warm up, like I have to get up and down. I just don't bend as well.
Yeah.
So it's like,
you might really focus on some mobility work and some yoga and some things like that. They're immensely valuable for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then also, when you ask what should you do to get in shape for jiu-jitsu, well, if you analyze it from the perspective of, okay, you have a certain mass, a certain size that you have to move around.
Right.
Even if you're not in better shape, if you're leaner and you're carrying around less body weight, that's automatically going to allow you to move better.
Right.
And so a lot of times with the older athletes, what I tell them is, go do your hill sprints, go get in shape, go do all the stuff, focus on the restorative stuff, make sure you're, working your end range flexibility. All those things are important, but get yourself lean because every extra pound is one that you have to lug around. And when someone's on top of you and you have to move, not just yourself, but them, it's much, much more difficult.
Yeah. Normally my cardiovascular fitness is pretty good. When I had my ankle rebuilt, I just got completely out of doing anything. But, like you put me in the pool right now, I can go do a mile. And most people on the planet can't do that.
Yeah. Well,
Not
that's
that
efficiency,
special,
right? You're optimized for that.
I know how to do that. Right. And so I have to try to start to build that in my other practice. And I'm glad you're talking about the off the mat stuff because I don't, jiu-jitsu cannot be my whole life because I've got this whole life, but I need to find ways to advance my art when I'm not there. Yesterday, I like to do the 6 a.m. class on Monday. And then I could make that noon class today on Tuesday, but then I'm going to do the morning class on Wednesday. And I'm like, I don't know that I could do 3 workouts.
Recovery. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I skipped yesterday and it really went against my core self that I've always been. But I'm glad I did because I was able to put in a good solid workout. And even then, I come like, how do I back it down to a 9 more often so that I'm working? But the off the mat stuff, I'm going to have to work on it. I'm not great at yoga. I've got this weird thing. My arms don't go straight, either one of them. So like one of the downward dog for me is just an exercise in blowing out my triceps. And so everything's an alternate move, but I do see the value of using it to open up my hips, to, strengthen my back and all that. I just, it's like there's a bubble between me and yoga that I'm having trouble piercing.
No, I get it. I don't, yoga bores me. Although we did aerial yoga the other day. We went to a facility and I have to say, man, that decompression of the spine hanging upside down and in my neck, it was really amazing. And it hit my hamstrings. It hit all the flexibility points, interestingly. So there are, a lot of ways to crack this problem.
Right. Yeah.
You just have to find what works for you. There's lots of modalities, lots of people. There's,
How much time does someone, like let's say I'm going to spend an hour off the mat and it's not yoga. I mean, am I putting my face into books? Am I looking at, obviously we're going to go to rickellis.com and go there, but what am I doing? How am I filling my brain? Because a lot of my problems, this is all white belt problems, but sometimes I'll get to a spot and I'm like, I don't know what to do from here.
Yeah.
I can't, so I already overthink. And now I run out of things to think about. And I'm like, I'll just tap from a lack of capability.
Right.
You know?
Well, in the early stages of jiu-jitsu, there's just so much to learn.
Right.
You have to learn the 4 major positions. You have to learn some of the minor positions. You have to learn what to do from those positions offensively and defensively. You have to learn sweeps and takedowns and chokes and arm bars and shoulder locks and leg locks. There's a ton to learn.
Yeah.
And you can't learn it all in one fell swoop. It's a long journey. And so what you have to do, in my opinion, is focus on the core fundamental things in jiu-jitsu that are most important. Defense being one of them. Learning how to defend from the 4 major positions is really, really good. But then the journey, once you get to about blue belt or so, mid-level blue belt for sure, is that you realize that you have enough now. You have enough. Not that you will ever learn it all. You will still learn new things. I'm still learning new things. But you have enough that if you were to put it together, just put together the things that you know, you would be very effective. And so typically the blue belt to purple belt journey is one of that mindset shift where you go from technique accumulation to technique mastery of the things that you know. And the questions, you say, okay, I got into a situation, I don't have a solution for that.
Right.
Well, that's your homework typically, because the problems that you face today on the mat inform what you're going to work on tonight or before you come back to class tomorrow. Right. Yeah. So that you have some idea of what to do from those positions. And sometimes it's just, you can't solve the whole thing. You've got a dilemma in jiu-jitsu. You can't solve the whole thing, but you can make a little epiphany that gives you part of the solution. And then you work on that for a while, and then your timing is better, and then you're able to use the next component of the solution. And then eventually you've got the full solution. So a lot of times it's just little improvements on a day-to-day basis, which can feel imperceptible. It doesn't feel like you advance the needle very much, but you're always having those little epiphanies that let you go a little bit deeper here, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. So keep chipping away at it, and another couple of years you'll probably be looking pretty good, and you're going to be ready to go a lot deeper into the things that you do well.
One of the things that, when I'm struggling to communicate in my dojo, and this is part of me learning how to talk to them so they can talk back to me. But I've noticed that there's a default answer, like that is part of the journey. Like, well, all right, thanks. But, and maybe that is the answer, right? But sometimes I'm like, I need you to help me understand the mindset, the philosophy, give me something to chew on, and don't just say that's the journey.
Yeah.
That probably is the answer.
Yeah.
But I do want something more because I am trying to learn. But I don't know, I struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never very satisfying to hear, just keep coming to class. But in a certain sense, that is the answer. That's the answer. You keep showing up.
Right.
And what's funny is when I was running my school, my son, Jordan, who was, 15 or something at the time, he was there on the first day of class, and he would literally go to class every single day. Every day that I was there teaching, he would be there training. And this kid never wanted to think about jiu-jitsu when he was off the mat.
Right.
He wasn't someone that was going down all the rabbit holes. He wasn't watching YouTube instructionals. He wasn't nerding out on the competition scene. Jiu-jitsu was completely out of his consciousness, other than when he was on the mat. And literally the only jiu-jitsu he ever learned was what I directly taught him, which was interesting. He was an interesting experiment, because I was the opposite. I was the nerd that by the time I was a blue belt, I literally owned 100 DVDs, instructional DVDs. Literally, I've got a giant stack.
Yeah.
And so I was the nerd that consumed everything. he was the non-nerd that didn't consume anything. And yet, after 5-6 years, this kid was a stone cold killer on the mat.
Yeah.
He would tap out guys that were way bigger, stronger, faster, more powerful. He was never a big kid.
Right.
And it made me realize that just coming to class is enough.
Yeah.
It's really enough. But most of us aren't quite that compartmentalized, and we're going to want to be a little more active in shoring up the things that are problems. Man, I keep getting my guard pass. I keep getting my guard pass. What do I do about it? And you start going down those rabbit holes. So there's not one right way, one wrong way.
Yeah.
But just responding to the just keep coming to class. I mean, a lot of times that's most of the battle.
Yeah. Well, and deep down inside, I know it is a good answer. It is not a very satisfying answer.
No.
But yeah, keep coming to class. One of the things I picked up from you was I really do just want to come to class. I'm not worried about, I don't think I'm worried about competition. The competitive side of me is like, why don't you look into it at least, And do I need to compete? Probably not. I'm not worried about that. I'm really not worried about belts and stripes. I really just don't care about that. I know if I show up, I'll get the next strap. I'm not against them, but I'm not, I just don't care about it. I don't know if that I ever will care. Maybe I'll have some longing to advance to a new belt and everything, but I just want to go and get my body into shape and keep it useful. And that's really the base goal for me.
Yeah. Well, what happens is this: you're a white belt. Once you're consistently giving the blue belts a hard time, there's some that you're able to tap, there's others you're still struggling with, but you're in the mix.
Yeah.
Typically, that's when you start caring about a belt. When you're just in the early stages of that new belt, you're like, I don't even think about the next belt. I'm not thinking about it. But then you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm in the mix here.
Yeah.
And so you might change. That perspective might change a little bit with time.
Do I have any business competing? I know they'll do like age and weight and belt and that kind of stuff, but do I even need to think about that, or should I just beat that out of my head?
The vast majority of jiu-jitsu athletes never compete, even once.
Wow.
Do you have to compete to get good at jiu-jitsu? No. Will competition reveal some things? Will it push you to get in much better shape than normal day-to-day training? Will it help you shore up some deficiencies? Yeah, of course. But there's a risk-reward ratio to competing. And a lot of times it's the training leading up to the training, because you have to roll with more purpose, more intensity. You're scaling it up. You're doing the hill sprints. You're doing all the stuff. And I've found that usually for me, that's when the injuries happen. Yeah. It's not competition day, although it can happen in competition. There's more risk, of course, but a lot of times it's just the increased activity that you're putting yourself under. Generally, my recommendation is that I think that it's valuable for any jiu-jitsu practitioner to at least experience competition at least once or twice.
Yeah.
At least once or twice. Just so you can feel what it's like to have somebody coming at you at so much more intensity than you will probably ever feel in the home gym.
Yeah.
And as martial artists, we need to be able to, flip that mindset and say, no, this is my day. I'm going to take it to you, even though I'm redlining myself and it's hard. So I recommend that. But, those rules, you're in your 50s. We need to cut some slack to the older athletes, because there's definitely more risk.
Yeah. I mean, just you describing, I used to fight, I used to box. And actually I remember when I was getting too old to box competitively, when I'm like, my hand wasn't where it was supposed to be. Like, oh, I didn't punch that guy already. Like, oh man, like and I was like 30 and I was like, oh, I'm not as good at this. And I was never anything special, but it was a hobby of mine, and maybe a little bit more than a hobby at certain points. And it was crazy to see that now, 25 years later, it's like, hey, again, I don't feel the need to, but there is that little compulsion. And maybe what I'll do is just go experience it once or twice and move on. But I mean, like if you're someone's mom and you're just going to drive around in your van and take care of your kids, that's your life. But this is the one thing you do for yourself physically. Like, what's your thought on that? Like, it seems like that should also be available to, someone's mom is like, oh yeah, I'm Ricky's mom. I'm here to, but that's a real thing. You really can go experience that in a way that is, even if there is the competition element, you're going to go against somebody who's comparable
Yeah.
in terms of the event, I imagine.
It depends on the competition. Most regional or local competitions, they tend to just be adult. It's just an open adult division,
Yeah.
which means if you're 50, you're going against the 30-year-olds. Not really a fair fight,
Right.
usually. But if you go to the Masters Worlds in Las Vegas, every year they have it, then you get your age and your level. So you're in, Masters 1 to Masters 7. You're somewhere in there at whatever weight you are. So it's a much better representation of where you're at.
Right.
Although that said, I went to the Worlds this year, and you can tell a lot of the older guys are on gear. You know, they're doing the growth hormone and the testosterone and maybe anabolics and stuff, because there's some guys that are just, you can just see it. So there's that side of it too, where guys,
I hadn't even considered that.
They wrap up a lot of their ego in being the man that day, and they do whatever it takes. And so that's the one that you're going against. But most of the time it'll be a, relative parity to where you're at.
I'm so not that guy. I mean, maybe testosterone replacement just because we're older and it's, it's helpful to have it, but not to like be, aggro and getting after it.
Beyond a normal range.
Yeah. And whatever, like if that's your game, that's your game. But yeah, I certainly, it's a decent amount of, there's a decent chance I'd be like, see if I could work with the guy and then just stop, because I just don't care. Like I don't care enough to care. But back when I boxed, this is again in the 80s, right? So way back in the 1900s, I was smart. I had a good chin. I had a big motor. And so that could defeat a lot of guys. It wasn't skill ever for me. And so I was just more fit. And so they would explode with a bunch of fists and I would just turtle up and then wait. And then they would be completely blown out, especially like the more muscles they had, the more I was, but I don't even care about that, I guess, anymore. It's not why I'm doing this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to start from your goal and work backward from there. What is your goal? My goal is fitness. My goal is longevity.
Right.
My goal is doing something that's fun and challenging. My goal is to hang out with cool people that enjoy this art because they're all cool.
Yeah.
And then you reverse engineer what that means for you and your body. And it's perfectly okay to not compete, or, if you're feeling it, compete. Right. If not, don't compete. I know older guys that are really into competition, and I know plenty that aren't.
Right.
And they're all skilled. They're all a challenge to roll against,
Yeah. Sparring back in the old days was fun. Like a guy who could spar well, it was good just to work on things. And you're not trying to knock each other out. Right. And I really enjoy. So I hope I can get to the point where that is where I can do in jiu-jitsu is just work on things and enjoy. Look, I get that there's the submission part and that kind of part of it, but that was some of the most fun I ever had in boxing was just finding somebody else who wanted to work on things, and then you just did it.
Yeah. Finding those people within your school that have a similar mindset, those guys are invaluable because you might not want a hardcore role where you're being pushed to the max. You might want to just flow.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those guys that you can identify and you can pull them aside and be like, hey, let's you and me go. We're just working. We're just flowing. We're just exchanging positions. We're not committed to an outcome. Doesn't matter if I tap you, great. If you tap me, whatever.
Yeah.
That becomes a different kind of role.
Right.
And I think it's really important to have that Rolodex of guys that, and then the flip side of that is, the guys that you need to avoid in the training room. Maybe they're just a little ultra aggressive. They've got too much ego. They put too much strength. As older athletes, I think we've earned the right to be more careful with our own bodies.
Yeah. And how do I make sure that I'm a good rolling partner? Like I want to provide resistance, but also, and so I'm learning that dance as well. It was funny. So one of the guys from my dojo reached out and he's like, hey, you've been going at it a couple of weeks now. How you doing? And I was like, oh, and I kind of gave him just a text exchange. And I said, and how do you think I'm doing? Because that's like the next level question. And he's like, I think you're doing great. You're coming, you're doing it. And I wouldn't change a thing. So just expand on that if you would.
Well, it's the question of strength versus technique is fundamentally what you're talking about. How much of our physical attributes is it appropriate to use versus pure technique?
Right.
And there's an inverse axis, I guess, between strength and technique, which when you have zero technique, all you have are physical attributes. That's the only pathway to success. But as your technique goes up, your physical attributes can go down. And eventually you're not using a lot of physical attributes. That said, it takes physical attributes just to do jiu-jitsu. Everybody preaches technique over strength. And look, we have to use, it takes strength to blink your eyes.
Sure.
You have to use strength to some extent. But you have to ask yourself, am I using the strength to compensate for lack of technique, or am I using my strength to magnify the technique? Because some guys are very strong, they're tough. You might have good technique, you might have them in a disadvantaged position, you might be working for a submission, but man, this dude is strong. You might have to put a little muscle into exposing that thing so you can get the tap. And so to me, that's the correct application of strength. It's just dealing with scenarios where you're like, man, it's just going to take a little more horsepower to deal with this. But generally, you're asking yourself, am I in that sweet spot where I'm using just enough attributes to be able to flow and express jiu-jitsu relatively well, but not so much that it's a compensation mechanism for my lack of technique?
Yeah, and in that, like, I want to use the things that I offer to my rolling partner to challenge them, but I also don't want to hurt them. I weigh a lot. Even if I'm in shape, I'm 215. So I'm just a heavy guy, and I have a long torso. So there's advantages to that, disadvantages too. But I usually say, this might be ridiculous, but I'll say, here comes the weight. And then I put it on them. And I know it's uncomfortable, but I'm trying to give them the opportunity to deal with something that's probably the heaviest thing they've ever had on them, at least on the mat, because there's no one I'm not the fattest guy in the world, but I'm heavy and I'm long, so my lever.
And ultimately, it's going to be, I don't want to call it a problem, but it's not optimal to be the biggest person at a school. Because you need those guys that can challenge you, that can really, use and expose you to the fact that I got to deal with size and strength and mass. It's bigger than me. And if you're never experiencing that, there's going to be a gap in your jiu-jitsu game.
That's a good point. And as I lose weight, I mean, I'll drop 40 pounds, pretty quickly now that I'm doing all this, but I'm still going to weigh 230. I'm still going to weigh 220. And that's going to be bigger than almost everybody there.
It's about precision, precision of movement. There are big guys. I know, plenty of guys that are 50, 60, 80 pounds heavier than me. But they're very technical. And I know I can roll with them, and they're not going to just crush me because they can. They're going to try to play a technical game. And I appreciate those guys. And then the flip side is, I know there are guys that are 50 pounds heavier than me or more that I'm not getting near those guys because, there's just risk. It's dynamic movements with a lot of mass. And I've been conked in the head. I got hit in the head by this, 250-pound guy. His knee, he was just doing this explosive movement and he nailed me, and it might have been a concussion. I never got it checked out, but so there's risk to those bigger bodies. And so you, as the bigger body, just be careful, protect people's bodies, try to move precisely. Of course, there's the pressure game in jiu-jitsu. There's two games in jiu-jitsu. You can play a more pressure-oriented game where it's tighter. You're using your weight, hopefully in ways that are structurally sound. So you're magnifying your weight at places where it makes sense. But then the flip side of that is a looser, flowier, more dynamic game.
Gosh, I hope I one day can get more looser and flowier.
Well, it'll happen. With work and focusing on that. You need to focus on that. If all you do is play a pressure game and you're like, man, I can't flow. Well, you never flow, bro.
Well, and also like legs versus arms and all these other things, and then not just relying on myself. If I want you off of me, I have a really strong bridge and I have a really strong chest that I can just shove you, but I don't want to do that. I want to work on the things that I'm not as good at. There's some ego in that, but also some lack of technique on my part.
Well, pressing people off of you, it can be effective, but it's risky because against someone skilled, you push, you've just given them an arm, they're going to swivel into an arm bar and take it. So we learned that, those kinds of approaches, they don't ultimately work very well against skill in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
But as athletes, we have to contend with the fact that there are guys that can just bench press you off.
Yeah.
And then you begin expanding your understanding of angles that give you leverage. Someone pushing into you, they may be incredibly strong in this dimension, but they're not strong if you push the arm away this way. So I'm bench pressing you off, but what happens if you blade yourself at that moment? You're going to crush my structure.
Yeah.
And so, you start learning how to deal with people bench pressing you off in way more intelligent ways.
Yeah. You also too, back to my size thing, like there's a lot of things where you go knee to the torso. And I'm like, I have to be so careful that if it's dynamic, that I'm not just putting a person in a car crash. You know, like, oh, I'm sorry, it's exploded your spleen with my giant knee.
Right.
I don't want that to be the case. And I'm new, so I'm going to struggle with it. But I'm also like, I don't ever want to hurt somebody else doing this, because we are all just accountants about to go home to our families and everything. But yeah, like that weight coming at that speed, if one of us gets that, it's easy to see how you can blow out anything. And I don't want to risk big falls. I don't want to do a lot of sweeps where I'm vertical. I just kind of want to stay on the ground as much as possible. But is that even viable? Do I need to be pushing myself to get more vertical and deal with things, do you think?
Well, it is a martial art, and all fights start on their feet.
Right. Yeah.
So having some skill and some strategy that you can run in that moment is really important. But that's going to be different for different people. You have certain physical gifts, you have certain limitations. You have to find the ways of taking people down that are safe for you and safe for them.
Yeah.
And, I've changed a lot of the ways that I take people down. And these days I'm much more about getting in tight and connecting, getting a waist grip, getting whatever.
Yeah.
So that it becomes an easier takedown for both parties, and more reliable and less risk prone than just, you're setting up a judo throw. I need to load you up. Now I'm going to throw you. Well, if my technique isn't perfect, I'm going to blow my back out or hurt my hip or do something. Yeah. So you have to, weigh the risk reward of all these things, and then find, in my opinion, you should have at least one forward technique, forward throw, forward takedown, one rear facing technique, and maybe one to each side. You don't need the whole complement, but there's 6 directions in judo. You should have something in each of those directions.
Sure.
And then, that could be enough. If that's, you have a 1-2 combo, 1-2 punch. You have, something you attack for, the common reaction, then you take them down. And so you develop a couple things that are going to work for you.
Yeah. And I guess that's where I want to try to figure that part out, is what that looks like. But also, and I was having this conversation with a guy from my dojo, and, I'm like, it's going to be kind of hard to defeat me, because I will just create space and walk out the door.
Yeah.
Like, I don't actually have to win. I win by just leaving. Like, you just can't beat me if I'm not here.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually going to practice that way, but that is like an overall philosophy. Like, I used to fight. I used to get into fights all the time, but I don't do that anymore. Like, I'm like, yeah, whatever. See you later.
Well, people always, the debates online about, okay, well, jiu-jitsu with multiple attackers isn't going to work. What if there's knives? What if there's this? What if there's that? A self-defense strategy has to start with situational awareness and the willingness to flee the moment the temperature starts going up. If that isn't in your game, isn't in your game plan, then you need to figure out your game plan, because just going in and getting into an altercation, man, that's foolish. And one thing that you learn from doing jiu-jitsu, especially if you've done it as long as I have, is that you can't tell how skilled someone is just by looking at them. It could be a skinny old guy that looks like, in fact, there's a guy they used to call him the professor. He was a college professor, and he was this Iranian. I think he wrestled in Iran when he was a kid. He was this skinny old guy in his 70s. This guy was a stone cold killer. Absolutely amazing. And so you don't know. You don't know who has skill and who doesn't. So as a strategic question, do you want to get into this altercation, verbal dispute with this guy just because he's smaller than you? Well, that guy could be a K1 kickboxing champion. You have no idea. And so that's, I think, the best thing to come from the fact that we're sparring and we have to accept getting defeated all the time versus the average guy walking through the world who never gets tested, who thinks I can handle myself in a fight. You see these altercations on YouTube, guys are nose to nose, chest to chest. And you're like, this is ridiculous. This is so strategically incompetent. Walking away is always the best solution if you can. Fighting should be the last thing at the very end because there's literally no choice.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about your summits that you put together, these old guys summits and everything. And by the way, everybody, just Art of Skill or Rick Ellis, you can see that down below me. Just go there, check it out. But yeah, like Tulum is coming up. You have the one coming up in San Diego. Talk about these things. What's the benefit for like someone like me? Like, hey, Pete, you should go because of, and then fill in the blank for me.
Well, a couple of years ago, I did my first, it wasn't an all-inclusive retreat. It was just a 3-day gathering here in San Diego for practitioners over the age of 40. It was mostly, the ticket price was mostly just the training, and then we throw a big party, dinner party, and get together. We do that the first day, so everyone gets to know each other, and then you train all weekend. And I didn't know if there'd be a big market for it. My YouTube channel, I've never really completely oriented it toward older athletes, but invariably that seems to be my demographic, and that seems to be the content that I make seems to resonate with that demographic more than anything. And so I did this one. I was a little nervous the first time, thinking, will anybody show up? I've got to pay for the dojo. I got to do this and this. But we sold out really fast. And so this next one that we're doing is an all-inclusive immersion camp, incredible facility, beautiful, facility, 4 nights, I think, 3 full days of training, or 5 nights. And the benefit is you're in a room full of people your age. Yeah. And you get to commiserate. You get to lick your wounds with that person. You get to talk about the body parts that are failing. And you get to train with people that are your age. And it gives you a much better gauge for how good you are. Right. Because if you're the oldest guy by 20 years at your school, you have no good reference point. Am I even good at this? Because you're going to be, not as effective. You're just older. You're not going to be as effective. Whereas in a room with people, and that's typically what I hear. That's probably the number one comment I hear is, man, what a joy to be in a room full of people my age and be able to do this. And so, my goal for this little brand that I created, it's called Old Grappler Summit. Right. And you can go to oldgrapplersummit.com. And the goal is to begin stacking more and more retreats, have lots of retreats every year, plug in instructors into slots so that we have, a full range of instructors doing this stuff. And so I'm a little early in that journey, but I think that's where I'm going with that business. And it just gives me, a way to help that demographic and that part of the community. Yeah. And man, they're fun. They're so fun. Yeah. Yeah. I want to try to figure out how to get to one of them, but it's a lot of value packed into that. I probably would just drive down, but even still, it's neat. And I have to have some FOMO for the San Diego one. I'm not going to do it because I don't have time, and it's not built in my schedule. But maybe one of the future ones is really neat to do. So thanks for coming on. Is there anything you want to ask me? I know I've been hammering you with questions and scenarios. Is there anything you want to throw at me? What sparked your interest in jiu-jitsu? I'm curious. Well, I've always had, so I was fortunate enough to learn about the UFC right in the very beginning. And like everyone else, I saw Royce Gracie upside down, grab a guy on the arm and beat him. And you're like, what happened? What just happened there? How'd that happen? Yeah. Right. And I watched him for and as a guy who fought and had a pretty big motor, I'm like, how are they doing this for so long? How is he just laying there? Yeah. Because my eye was completely untrained. And so I was captured even then. And there was no way I was in Germany at the time. There was no way to reliably go and train in this stuff. And so there's no option. You just looked at it and wondered. It was back when they were like, here's the karate man, here's this guy. Yeah. And then Royce just kept snapping people's arms. I'm like, they're breaking their arms. Yeah. Oh my God, And so I'm like, boxing clearly isn't going to be the answer. And I was really kind of done boxing. But
I've always had that. I've bought the books. I haven't bought all the DVDs, but when I was in Iraq, you could find someone to kind of train on whatever. And we were really truly um, mixed martial artists. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm a 7th degree this and that, but in some useless thing that you're trying to apply into this model, And so have always been adjacent to it, never fully bought in. I've gone belts and different systems and everything, but nothing to the end, because life moves on, or I move on, or whatever it is. But I just and actually, when I was in my 40s, I was saying to my buddy John, who's a black belt, and I'm like, I just think I've aged out of black belting, and that's just going to have to be okay. And that was probably 10 years ago or so, because I thought maybe I'll get. It was like one of those things, like, I'd like to get a degree. I'd like to get a black belt one day. And yeah, so I always have I've had all the pads and the punching bag. I've had all that stuff, but I kind of got rid of everything. But there was still this spot in me where, like, I do like to get physical. I do like to, I'll say the word compete, but I don't mean like in like a competition.
Yeah, you're competing on the mat every day.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so I felt like I was missing that from my life. And again, reading Hodger's book just kind of sparked the thing, like, but that's where it all started. It's in the 90s, and watching these things and being a young dude. And I lived in Vegas back when, it was like UFC 50, and so you could go to these events, and it's like in some ballroom, and you're like, here I am at a ball. And because I was in Vegas, and I didn't have to even pay. You could just go. Yeah. Now it's this thing where they're going to be at the White House. Yeah. Holy shit. Right. So it's always just sort of
a long way from John McCain trying to ban it, calling it human crazy cockfighting.
Yeah, it is a long way, and so it's just this amazing thing, and I just want to have something that I can grow old with. I'm not in any way enamored by racket sports. I'm not going to play softball anymore. Yeah, but I think I can grow old with this sport. I think.
Yeah, you have a similar story as mine. I watched UFC 1 in 1993, like everybody else, but there's no place to go learn it like there is now. So it would have to wait for me quite a while.
When did you know that you were going to move on and actually become like a professor? Like at what level? Like, did you just always have it and you kept going and it just built?
Well, I've had an eclectic career, and when I started my school, honestly, first of all, I've always been obsessed with jiu-jitsu. I'm very OCD, and when I get into something, I get really into something. So I've been obsessed with jiu-jitsu for years and years. But when I opened my school as a new brown belt, and then eventually I earned my black belt during that journey and continued, it was really a hobby business. I owned a software company, a web company, and we're doing well. I liked the idea of owning a school. We were in an environment where there wasn't any jiu-jitsu. We moved to Wyoming, to this town. There wasn't jiu-jitsu. And I thought, well, okay, I guess I'll do it. Yeah. And so initially I didn't think it was, I ran my schools professionally. I always treated it professionally. I wanted to be the best instructor possible for my students. I wanted to give them everything that I'd been given. And all that. So I ran it like a real environment, but I didn't need the money from this little martial arts school. It wasn't a big money maker. But eventually I had to shut that company down, that software company. It came to an end, and some things changed in my life. And, I'm standing there thinking, okay, do I want to spin something else up in tech again? Yeah. Man, I'm so burnt out. I've done that for years. I'm so over it. Yeah. And I had started this YouTube channel during COVID. And it was doing well, and and I love jiu-jitsu, and I thought, maybe there's a pathway here. As ludicrous as it is for a guy in his 50s, at the time, I was in my 50s, thinking, am I really going to make a career out of jiu-jitsu as this older guy? Like, am I even good enough? And I've had elite instructors. I've really trained under excellent people. I'm very confident in what I know and what I can teach and all that. But there's still those questions because you're just this older athlete. But the path kind of has unfolded, and I'm getting lots of opportunities to teach all over the place. I taught in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and I've taught in Europe. I've taught, all over the place. And now I'm running these camps and these retreats. So it gives me a way to stay really involved in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And, as I get older, and eventually I probably won't be able to, be on the mat the way I am now, then maybe I'll just run this retreat business, and I'll still be connected.
How old do you think you can go? Like, how long can you continue to do this?
Well, I'm 61,
Right.
and every decade gets a lot harder, a lot harder. You know, I look back at running a school in my 50s. I was literally on the mat every day,
Yeah.
training, teaching, training, rolling, sparring 5-6 days a week. And yeah, your body hurts, but I could still do it.
Mhm.
I don't know if I could do that today.
Yeah.
6 days a week, sparring and training, and it would have to be really mellow sparring, you know, most days
Yeah.
to survive that. So yeah, it just gets harder. You know, a lot of just depends on obviously whether the body can continue to do it, because at some point there's that risk of, okay, I've got some issues in my neck. They're no longer issues that I can navigate easily, and there's some real risk to a permanent injury here that's going to decrease the quality of my life moving forward. So it's always those questions, and I can't answer when that end is coming, but I assume at some point I'll probably stop rolling. That'll probably be the first thing to happen. Maybe I'll still drill, maybe I'll still train, and then who knows from there. But so far I'm doing okay. My body still functions pretty well, and I'm able to get after it pretty good and not suffer too much afterwards.
But I hear the cautious optimism, you know, because I'm in the same boat. Like, again, maybe I get to a black belt one day. I don't know. That's not up to me. Up to me is showing up every day. But yeah, is it worth it to go out and do these? Like right now, to sit there, my right shoulder is still just, you know, my whole collarbone area. Yeah. And that's fine. I can deal with it, right? But there's times like when someone will bump into me as he gets into my guard, and that shock to my spine sends like because my pain is like always at like a 6 or a 7, really a 7. And then when they bump into me in the wrong way, 10, I'm like, whoa, hold on. And then I can calm it down. Yeah. But that tells me like, hey man, chill out. Like, give it a second. And then everybody's great around me about this, but that's a real thing. And it's not going to get better as I get older. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we all have our limitations, and we have to figure out whether we can navigate those things or whether this sport is not right for that. You know, there's that question. I can't answer that question for you. Yeah. Only you can. All I can advise you is, you know, really focus on the stuff that builds up your body, right? Because jiu-jitsu can be destructive to your body if you're not careful with it. It can build you up. You'll be fitter, you'll be more mobile, you'll be all the things. But if that's the only thing you're doing jiu-jitsu, it will break you down over time. Yeah. And so you have to be doing the flip side of that, which is building the engine, building the resilience and the flexibility and all those things. So yeah, as long as you're doing all that stuff, then, you know, it's just, can your body still do it? That's the question.
Well, let me wrap this up. You have anything you want to say in closing before we wrap this up? You think all you want to
No, add? I mean, you know, I was just going to point people to my social, but you've done a good job of that.
Drop down there.
And yeah, if you ever want to come down to San Diego or any of the other places we're doing retreats, we would love to have you.
All right, everybody. That's today's show, and I'll have something for you tomorrow. As always, it's great. For sure, go support Rick. Here are the links one more time to so you guys can all see them. And if you are thinking about getting into it, I found it really helpful to watch the videos because there's so many questions like, can I do this? Should I do this? Well, he's got a ton of information on that. Definitely go check out all his stuff, and I'll see you all later.